The Last of Us Part 2 launched roughly a month ago and has been a pinnacle of discussion. The narrative of the game is very divisive and kickstarts a great opportunity for a philosophical chair whenever ignorance isn't in place. I've completed the game 3 times and obtained the Platinum Trophy, so I feel I've had enough time to reflect on this game and garner my thoughts. Today, I want to do a deep dive on the game's main protagonist, Ellie and Abby. Reason as to why is because the hate and division among fans of this beloved series comes directly from these two mirroring characters. Before we discuss, I want to openly say that I am a huge fan of The Last of Us, and I highly anticipated the sequel's long way to release. My game was also provided by PlayStation. In this analysis, I want to specifically dissect the overall themes and message behind the story, as well as how well different major story beats impacted the overall experience, particularly the most controversial parts of the game. This includes if Joel's death was warranted and executed properly, was Abby fleshed out enough to serve a significant purpose to the game as intended, Ellie's obsession for revenge, and if it all comes together to make an end that holds a true waitful purpose. This won't be a retelling or breakdown of all the characters and events, but more so what I think of the Ellie and Abby duality specifically. At the beginning of our story, we are a few weeks ahead of the day Joel committed his Firefly massacre to save Ellie. We pick up with Joel, who is on a patrol route with Tommy. During the patrol, Joel reveals the truth of what went down at the St. Mary Hospital. Tommy asks if Ellie knows of what happened, and Joel tells him he told Ellie the Firefly's ransom test and gave up because ultimately her immunity meant nothing. Despite the heaviness of the situation, Tommy swears to keep Joel's secret. From there, we pick up 4 years later in the shoes of Ellie, and we get a taste of what life in Jackson is like, as well as get introduced to her friends Jesse and Dina. During the introduction, we also get our first look at a mysterious woman by the name of Abby. Abby's hiding out in a cabin just outside of Jackson with a group of friends. Reason being is they are looking for someone who resides in the community. That someone is Joel. After running with an infected horde while attempting to infiltrate Jackson, Abby crosses paths with Joel and Tommy and they save her life. In a desperate escape, they all return back to Abby's cabin hideout. This brings us to the scene where a large portion of writing criticism comes into play. We'll further elaborate later on this thought. As things are settling down inside the cabin, Abby and her group become aware of the man standing before them, and an ambush ensues. Abby then confronts Joel without giving a reason on why she's committing this horrific act against him. Joel then looks around the room and comes to terms with his fate, and the torture begins. As those events transpired, Ellie was out on patrol with Dina taking shelter from the blizzard. That was until a panicked Jesse informed Ellie that Joel and Tommy were missing. Ellie goes hunting for them and walks in on Joel's murder. Unable to stop the attack, Ellie was forced to witness Joel's death. Now, this is where lots of people are angry, claiming that this is bad writing and it isn't like Joel to trust strangers. You have to keep in mind that Joel has been building up and recruiting people to Jackson for the last 4 years. That is the whole point of the patrols, in fact. Clear out the infected in a covering area and bring back people who are interested in being recruited. This is no longer the man that is doing whatever to survive. Jackson is a second chance for everyone who joins the community. It's like a restoration of one's humanity. These are people of all kinds of backgrounds who may have done horrible things just to make it to see the next day. The sense of community and dependency on each other that built the town up brings everyone to a form of accountability. This is supported by a note found during Ellie and Dina's patrol. So the argument of Joel is not acting like himself isn't valid, because the Joel we see here isn't the same Joel we saw in part 1. I personally really liked how they handled Joel's death scene. Not at one point did Joel cry or plead for his life. He didn't by any means go out like a bitch.
Why don't you say whatever speech you got rehearsed? Get this over with.
Which clearly pissed her off. Lastly, saying this death isn't impactful isn't very valid either. It's literally the driving force that kickstarts the motive of the game, which is wanting to kill Abby. In the second half of the game, it is revealed that Abby and a group of friends who are part of the WLF are actually ex-Fireflies who are stationed at the St. Mary Hospital. We're also introduced to Abby's dad, Jerry, who is actually the Dr. Joel murders when he saves Ellie. Shortly after Jerry is murdered, Abby comes across his corpse and grieves at the loss of her only family. From here, the Fireflies don't have much sense of what to do or where to go next, because the only person capable of producing the vaccine is now dead, so they ultimately disbanded. Even after leaving everything behind, she of course is still haunted by the deed Joel committed and longs for the day she could have revenge. This now leaves us with Ellie, who is now highly motivated to seek revenge on Abby. As Ellie hunts Abby down, we see her undergo a very dark path and become someone who isn't much like herself at all. The once innocent, hopeful Ellie now becomes a merciless killing machine. In my eyes, she becomes someone who is going down an even darker path than Abby did. Abby's obsession with revenge put strain on her relationships. For years, all she could ever think about and work towards is the day she finally crosses paths with Joel. Her extensive training had a cost, and that cost was the disregard she had for her friends. All she could worry about was the chance to finally put justice in place. And that chance came knocking at her front door, when some ex-Fireflies who served with Tommy a decade ago gave up some information on his location. After killing Joel, Abby slowly becomes aware that revenge brought her no closure. This is what leads us into Abby's phase of redemption, but her path to redemption doesn't start until after she nearly dies by the hand of the Seraphites. Abby survives her attack because two ex-Seraphites by the name of Yara and Lev ended up saving her. After working with these two kids, who were once a part of a group she killed relentlessly, Abby had a piece of herself beginning to surface, a piece of herself she lost years ago when her dad was murdered, that being her humanity. Meanwhile, on the flip side of the coin, Ellie's losing her humanity and becoming a monster. As Ellie shreds through Seattle, killing everyone in her way, she loses herself more and more, but there's instances that bring Ellie back to realization of what she's doing. The first is the brutal torture she brought on Nora to make her give up Abby's location. At this point, Ellie has now become the person she's chasing down. She beat Nora the same way Abby beat Joel. When Ellie returns to the theater, she tells Dina that she made Nora talk, and you can visibly see she feels disgusted with what she's done. Her PTSD of Joel was triggering by her mirroring actions. Another instance of remorse is when she realizes Mel is pregnant after murdering her. This makes her think of her pregnant girlfriend, Dina. After all the killing Ellie has done, her PTSD ultimately brought her to a realization that it just wasn't worth it anymore. Only problem with that is Ellie continued a cycle of violence. She murdered all of Abby's friends, and this ultimately will destroy the now redeemed Abby. If we flip the coin and go back to Abby's shoes, Abby's doing everything she can to help Yara and Lev, even abandoning the WLF to do right by these kids. People criticize and say, why would Abby suddenly kill her own friends for two kids she just met? But the truth is, the WLF aren't her friends. Her only friends are the initial group she joined the WLF with. Abby saw the WLF as an opportunity, somewhere to go. She used them as a way to train with her own personal motive in mind. After completing her deed of killing Joel and realizing it means nothing, she now has no reason to connect with the WLF. Also, Owen always had his own motive to leave, in an attempt to find the Fireflies in Santa Barbara. He also wanted their whole group to follow suit. After Abby's redemption arc and pretty much saying screw the WLF, she's ready to go. But what she doesn't know is she's continued a cycle after killing Joel. Abby has created a monster in Ellie, and Ellie's coming for her, destroying everything Abby loves as she does it. After seeing the mirroring paths of our two protagonists, the time comes where they inevitably cross each other. This is where the player undergoes one of the biggest self-conflicts of the entire game. We are put in the shoes of Abby and forced to kill Ellie for revenge in the name of Abby's friends. This is where the cycle comes full circle, and now Abby's trying to take everything remaining from Ellie. After an epic brawl, Abby comes to mere moments from ending it all, but Lev pulls Abby back into a realization that if she commits this act, her entire line of redemption would have been for nothing. Abby then takes the step to be the bigger person, and she walks away. This is what should have been the end of the cycle, but it ends up being continued. 2 years later, Ellie once again is brought the choice of walking away or going after Abby when Tommy brings info on her trail. Ellie makes the decision to go, which will cause her to undergo more loss. When Ellie catches up to Abby, Abby has no intentions to fight Ellie. She left it behind, but Ellie forces Abby to do it. She does this by threatening Lev's life. After fighting with Abby and nearly killing her, Ellie has a vision of Joel and lets her go. This closes the cycle of violence. Now that we did a quick rundown of Ellie and Abby, let's discuss the two characters and how I perceive the plot. After digesting the entire story, I can't help but to feel that Ellie and Abby are literally one and the same. They directly mirror each other, neither of them are bad people. They both have good reasons to justify their actions, but this wouldn't make them heroes. It all lands on how far they would go to justify those actions, which damages their morality. This game to me is a message of empathy and forgiveness. We see two heartbroken girls trying to find themselves. Abby's trying to learn to let go after killing the one that has wronged her, while on the other side, Ellie's trying to find what she thinks is closure and killing the one that's wronged her. I have no hate for Ellie or Abby. I love them both. But I would have to say that Ellie is the one who is on the lower end of the morality spectrum. Ellie made me question her loyalty. She walked in on Tommy when her and Jesse could have helped him. She walked out on her own family, and she even threatened to kill a kid who had nothing at all to do with her beef with Abby. This is the same child that saved her, Dina, and JJ's life. There's one thing that is and always should be off limits, and that's children. Abby also isn't a bad person like how everyone puts across. She feels deep regret and sorrow after killing Joel. She goes through a very touching sequence of events, and it's the reason I love her so much. She grows so much as a person throughout the narrative, and it's admirable. The only way you can see this is if when you see her side of the story, you must see it in her shoes, not from the third person, and surely not from Ellie's shoes. I won't lie and say this is the game that I was expecting. I thought we were getting more Joel and Ellie adventures, but of course that's not what happened. I did heavily enjoy the plot that was brought forth though. It has a very detailed layer of intricacy that takes a lot of unpacking, too much unpacking to do in one video. And lastly, I want to end off with Joel. Even though Joel was killed, I feel like he was still served justice. The Ellie and Joel flashbacks were some of the peaking points of the narrative of this game for me. It is what we originally fell in love with in the first game. All in all, I think this story makes sense and perfectly continues the story after the first, because it picks up from the heavy ending we got from part 1. It would be very cheap to let such an event go forgotten and unanswered. The Last of Us Part 2 in my eyes is a good game, and it's awesome to see how much discussion can come from it as long as things are civil. Ellie and Abby are greatly fleshed out characters, and I can only hope to see the both of these awesome girls in a part 3 in the future. So yes, the ending of The Last of Us Part 2 is wrapped up perfectly. We have two broken girls who have found their humanity, and they both are content with everything that's happened to them because they're able to just let go and walk away.